Hello, this is the first episode of the Historical Generals Tournament. Here's the bracket. How this works is the two generals in the playoff face off on this map. The higher ranked one starts in the fortress with the red door, and the lower ranked one starts in the fortress with the blue door. Both generals will fight with the technology they had at their disposal and soldiers until one surrenders, or in the most extreme cases, one's army is completely wiped out. Every team will start with 500 soldiers at the beginning of the tournament. All soldiers from the era and country in which the general is from. For example, Napoleon would fight with French Napoleonic soldiers. When a general wins a battle, they advance. Some sailboats, canoes, and rowboats are allowed, but nothing more. Every round, a team advances to add 20 soldiers, but teams do not get back the soldiers they lost in battle, and most generals have a backup in case they kick the bucket. Before that out of the way, let's get to it. Napoleon Bonaparte versus Joan of Arc, and context. Napoleon Bonaparte was a general in the French army during the French Revolutionary Wars and the Napoleonic Wars. He climbed up the ladder to become a consul and eventually the Emperor of France, and led his army into many victories, taking over much of Europe and turning them into French vassal states, until he was eventually defeated after being exiled twice by Allied coalition consisting of the likes of Prussia, France, and Prussia, the UK, and Joan of Arc was a young teenager in the French army during the Hundred Years' War. They're both French, who fought against the British in many battles, claimed to see visions from saints, and also kicked the British mostly out of France, however, it was eventually burned at the stake by the British. To the actual battle. At the beginning, Napoleon will be focused at the red door. So let me explain something. The triangle for everyone will be cavalry. The square will mean infantry, and the circle will mean artillery. So the red means it's the higher ranked seed. In this case, Napoleon, who also starts at the red door. The blue means the lower ranked seed. In this case, Joan of Arc, who starts at the blue door. Napoleon will make the first move, positioning himself and his artillery on the west side of the lake. And then he would send the infantry and General Bernadotte on the hill and his cavalry to defend the fortress. Joan of Arc will make the next move, assembling rowboats and her entire army to go across this lake in the middle here to go right straight to Napoleon's forces. During their voyage, they will meet up with this island they have stopped at here and will make an encampment for the night to plan for the next day. And then, as the day comes, they will make the voyage again towards Napoleon's forces. After landing, they will meet some resistance from Napoleon and his artillery, but very minimal. However, then they'll start to pick up and they'll move towards the hill to face off against General Bernadotte and his infantry Napoleonic soldiers on the hill. They will fight a pretty intense battle, Joan losing her entire cavalry forces due to horses not being too good on hills, and, however, ultimately, Bernadotte will be forced to retreat off the hill, and Joan and her forces will win the Battle of the Hill. Doesn't really have an official name. However, after that, the artillery of Napoleon's forces will burn down their rowboats. To make it worse, they will completely surround Joan and her forces with artillery, cavalry, and infantry. Shit. Sorry. Cannonballs will begin to be fired at Joan and her knights, and she will make a desperate retreat eastward to get through the forest and around back to the fortress to make a last stand. Napoleon will proceed north, trying to follow Joan behind the mountains, followed by the cavalry. But the infantry and artillery will relentlessly go after Joan of Arc and her knights. Joan will eventually reach the forest, where she will hide out, trying to get back to her fortress. However, Napoleon and his cavalry soldiers will be outside the forest and will begin starting fires. The fire will pick up, taking down the entire force and eventually killing Joan and many of her forces. A subtle irony for her being burned at the stake. And then the cavalry will surrender over. The infantry will surrender over to Napoleon and his forces. And here's the casualty board. It will show that Napoleon clearly won and how many soldiers were lost, so we can keep this for other videos. George Patton versus Leon Trotsky in context. George Patton was a brilliant general of the U.S. Army during World War II. And Leon Trotsky was the military coordinator for the Soviet Union during the Russian Revolution and Russian Civil War. George Patton versus Leon Trotsky. Patton will make the first move, positioning his infantry towards the mountains and sending his cavalry, mainly made out of tanks, around the lake, while keeping his artillery safe near the fortress. Trotsky will keep his artillery near his fortress, while sending his horse cavalry and his infantry towards the tank cavalry of Patton. Patton will move through the woods with his infantry, waiting for a battle, and they got one. The tank cavalry would battle with the horses and infantry in a bloody battle. However, Trotsky's forces will ultimately win, although their numbers will be dwindled. Trotsky's forces will move back around, completely taking a full turnaround as Patton and his infantrymen will come around through the forest. Patton will attempt to take the fortress, however, will meet fierce artillery resistance. Will actually end up in a battle between the infantry and artillery. The infantry will ultimately win, securing the fortress and forcing Trotsky into a surrender. 9. Frederick the Great versus 24 ranked Benedict Arnold. In context, Frederick the Great was a general in the Prussian army, but also the king of Prussia at the time, and he ruled during the 7 Years' War, attacking Austria and actually doing pretty well for Prussia in Europe, which of course Americans know more as the French and Indian War. Then Benedict Arnold was a commander in the American army before becoming a traitor and serving for the British during the American Revolution. Benedict Arnold versus Frederick the Great. Frederick the Great will start in the north in the red door, while Benedict Arnold will start in the blue door. Arnold will make the first move, moving his artillery slightly east, while Frederick the Great will proceed by putting his cavalry forces to the west. Frederick the Great will move behind the mountains with his infantrymen, while Benedict Arnold will head towards the forest. Both cavalries will meet towards the west of the lake. A showdown will appear between the infantries of Frederick the Great and Benedict Arnold in the forest, both led by their commanders in that same forest. At the same time, the cavalry of both the forces will meet up on the southern western part of the lake. Artillery will begin to surround Benedict Arnold from Frederick the Great's side, and they will completely encircle his entire infantry, while the cavalry are still fighting. Forces will dwindle in the army, and eventually they will chase down Benedict Arnold himself, and will capture him. However, back at the cavalry side, both cavalries will begin to dwindle in size as Benedict Arnold sues for peace. 8. Duke of Wellington, 25 ranked Yamamoto. In context, the Duke of Wellington was the British general during the Napoleonic Wars and beat Napoleon at the Battle of Waterloo, which would send him packing back to St. Helena. Yamamoto was the Japanese general who planned Pearl Harbor and many Japanese battles and attacks during World War II. The Duke of Wellington versus Yamamoto. Yamamoto will make the first move, positioning his artillery further to the east, while Duke of Wellington will go with his cavalry towards the west and his infantry, while his artillery followed suit, staying put. Yamamoto will light a forest fire in the forest to try to make a dead end for Wellington and his troops, causing a bigger and bigger fire, much like what Napoleon did to Joan of Arc, and burning down the entire forest, making it impenetrable to go through. Duke of Wellington and his troops will move towards Yamanote. However, Yamanote will split up his troops into a bunch of his infantry into a bunch of smaller troops, able to take on the Wellington at many different points. Will begin to dig holes underground and tunnels to get around Wellington's forces, much like what was used by the Japanese during the Battle of Iwo Jima against the Americans. Wellington and his forces will work against the Japanese forces at the western edge of the lake and will completely wipe out that one small troop. However, the tunnels will continue being built, and one will go behind Wellington's back and will bring spawn a new troop ready to take on Wellington and his forces. Wellington's artillery will begin to move further. However, Duke of Wellington's army will get destroyed, and Wellington himself will be captured by the Japanese. Japanese artillery and cavalry will begin to move in as the battle seemed hopeless to Wellington and the British. 5 ranked Ulysses S. Grant versus 28 Shaka Zulu. Ulysses S. Grant was the main general in the Union Army. Later became president during the American Civil War, and he fought off Robert E. Lee and the Confederates at Appomattox Courthouse and won the war. Shaka Zulu, on the other hand, was a fighter against the British and leader of the Zulus in South Africa. Ulysses S. Grant versus Shaka Zulu. Shaka Zulu will make a move towards the forest with his infantry and cavalry, and Grant will follow suit, moving towards the woods with his artillery going first. Grant's and Shaka Zulu's artillery and cavalry will meet in the middle, starting a bloody battle between the two sides. Meanwhile, Grant's cavalry will begin to meet up with Shaka Zulu's infantry, while Shaka Zulu will head into the Union lines alone. Shaka Zulu will be metaphorically and literally cooked by the Union artillery and guns. After finishing off Shaka Zulu, the infantry will move back towards the artillery and will finish off the cavalry of the Zulus. Then all three branches of the army will begin moving in towards the Zulu holdout at their infantry near the lake. They will begin thinning down and more the forces of Shaka Zulu's forces until they will eventually completely wipe out or capture all of them, winning the battle. Three-ranked Genghis Khan versus 30-ranked Lawrence of Arabia. In context, Genghis Khan was a warrior and the king of Mongolia during the Mongol Empire and conquered the lands from China into Europe, Eastern Europe, near Ukraine. And Lawrence of Arabia was a World War One general who fought in Arabia against the Ottomans and destroyed their supply lines during World War One. Genghis Khan versus Lawrence of Arabia. Genghis Khan would make the first move, moving his infantry towards the forest while staying put near the fortress and moving his cavalry and artillery around the lake. Lawrence of Arabia will move with his cavalry through the woods, while the infantry will go more towards Genghis Khan and his artillery and cavalry. Lawrence of Arabia will pick small fights with the Mongol infantry, keeping them on the run, forever chasing him around the countryside. Meanwhile, a brutal battle will form between the infantry of Lawrence of Arabia and the cavalry and artillery of Genghis Khan. The infantry of the Mongols will continue chasing Lawrence of Arabia through the mountain, Norfolk's mountain, while another brutal battle will commence down south between Genghis Khan's artillery and cavalry and the infantry of Lawrence of Arabia. Next, there will be another small fight between the cavalry and infantry up north, and Lawrence of Arabia will finish off the Mongol infantry while moving around the lake. Meanwhile, Genghis Khan will take on Lawrence of Arabia's artillery with massive artillery of his own and cavalry. The fun thing about Genghis Khan is that he usually would be very rewarding to those who who surrendered or joined his side, and very punishing to those who resisted. His army will be built up more from those added troops. There will be a final stand against Lawrence of Arabia. Genghis Khan planned to kill all that resisted, brutally. The final battle happened, and Lawrence of Arabia would surrender. Hey, hope you liked the video. I'll also post a new bracket after this week on YouTube. Sorry that it was a little late. I just had to do some other things. But hopefully tune in for next week. Thank you.